I declined a shared fence upgrade my neighbor proposed. Weeks later, my fence was removed without notice, my yard was trampled, and my tools vanished. When I called the city, they claimed I approved the project, but a forged signature pointed back to one person. I've owned my home in Modesto, California since 2008. Paid it off slowly, month after month. I raised my daughter here, buried a dog in the backyard, and spent weekends fixing things just to keep my hands busy after the divorce. It's not a mansion, but it's mine. Every inch of it. I never had problems with neighbors until Tony and Rachel moved in. They bought the house next door late last year. Young couple, early 30s. I remember the day they moved in. They had one of those loud Bluetooth speakers blaring indie pop and were barking orders at the movers like they were running a business. I stayed polite, gave them space. Even walked over that first weekend with a six-pack to say welcome. Tony cracked one open, thanked me, and then launched into a list of things they planned to modernize. We're doing all new windows, new deck, new solar, he said. And definitely replacing that old fence between us. That last part wasn't a suggestion, it was a statement. I just nodded, didn't commit to anything. About a week later, he officially asked me to split the cost. The fence looks tired, he said. We want something cleaner, horizontal boards, modern stain. It'll increase both our property values. I told him I appreciated the offer, but I wasn't interested. I had just replaced part of that fence myself 2 years ago. It wasn't pretty, but it held strong. More importantly, I didn't want to spend $2,000 or $3,000 on something cosmetic when I had other priorities. Tony smiled, but it was the kind of smile people use to cover frustration. No worries, he said. Just thought I'd ask. That was it. Or so I thought. Weeks went by. Nothing unusual until one Thursday afternoon I came home from work and saw a work crew in my yard. They were wearing safety vests, tearing out fence posts, stomping all over my lawn, and tracking mud everywhere. I didn't even park. I jumped out of the car and asked the first guy I saw what the hell they were doing. Replacing the fence, he said casually, like it was no big deal. Nobody told me, I said. This is my property. He paused, glanced at a clipboard, and said, we have homeowner approval. From both sides. That's when my stomach dropped. I didn't sign anything. I hadn't agreed to anything. They wouldn't stop working. Said to take it up with the city if I had a problem. So I did. I called the Modesto building department the next morning. I told them I never signed anything for a permit, never gave verbal approval, nothing. The lady on the phone was polite but firm. We have your signed approval on file, sir. I asked for a copy. She emailed me a scanned PDF. My name was at the bottom. My signature was there. But it wasn't mine. It was a sloppy imitation. Not even close. My real signature is clean and tight. I've signed enough contracts over the years to make it muscle memory. This one looked like someone had tried to copy it from memory after seeing it once on a check. The kicker? The form had been notarized. I asked to see the original. I drove down to the office. And that's where I saw the real damage. There it was, my name, fake signature, and a rushed, slanted notary stamp with the initials RTM. I asked for the notary's info, and when they gave me the name, Rachel T. Myers, it all clicked. Rachel, my neighbor's wife. She worked remotely, always in and out of Zoom calls. She didn't just help fake my approval, she notarized it under her own license. I went home, furious. Tried to talk to Tony. He wasn't home. Rachel answered the door, holding their yappy little dog. I told her I knew about the fake permit, the signature, the notary fraud. She blinked like she was confused. Tony said you approved it. He said you talked about it and just wanted it done while you were at work. I stared at her. I never said any of that. And that's not my signature. She shrugged, like it wasn't her problem. Meanwhile, my backyard was a disaster. My lawn was chewed up. My shed, where I kept my tools, had been opened. My padlock was missing, and 3 power drills, 2 saws, and a pressure washer were gone. I called the crew, asked if they moved anything. They claimed they never touched my shed, said it was already open. I filed a police report, filed a report with the city, called my insurance. Nothing. No one wanted to touch it. Civil matter. Dispute between neighbors. Hard to prove theft when there's no forced entry and no cameras. Tony must have realized I was pushing back because that's when he went on the offensive. He posted in 2 local Facebook groups I was in. Said his elderly neighbor was unstable and harassing them. Claimed I had memory issues and agreed to the fence months ago. He made it sound like I was some confused shut-in who forgot what he said. He started painting himself as the victim, told other neighbors I was hostile, that I yelled at Rachel, that I was threatening legal action over a simple fence. But it wasn't just a fence. He forged my name. His wife committed notary fraud. They trespassed, destroyed my lawn, stole from me, and tried to turn the community against me. They thought I'd just roll over, that I'd be too tired or broke to fight. They were wrong. The moment I realized Rachel had notarized that fake signature, something in me switched. I'd been patient, civil, trying to go through the right channels. But after all this, the forgery, the stolen tools, the lies online, I knew I had to get serious. I went back to the city office and demanded to file a formal complaint against Rachel. I brought in copies of my real signature, dating back years, mortgage documents, tax filings, old insurance forms, all of them clean and consistent. Then I handed them the permit with the fake one. The clerk looked uncomfortable, said she'd pass it to legal. But I could tell it was going nowhere unless I pushed harder. So I did. I found a local attorney, someone a friend from church recommended. He was older, straight-shooter type. When I showed him the paperwork, he shook his head and said, "They committed fraud. If your neighbor's wife is a licensed notary, this could ruin her." That was the first time I allowed myself to smile. But while my lawyer started drafting a complaint and contacting the California Secretary of State's office about Rachel's notary license, Tony was ramping up his game. One afternoon I came home and saw my mailbox taped shut. Not vandalized, just cleanly, tightly sealed shut with heavy-duty packing tape. I had to slice it open with a pocket knife. 2 days later, my trash bin disappeared from the curb. I had to request a new one from the city. Petty crap, but nonstop. Then one night, I heard footsteps in my backyard. I keep my curtains open sometimes, just enough to catch movement. I looked out and saw someone shining a flashlight near my shed. I stepped outside and yelled. The figure bolted through the gate toward Tony's side. I called the cops. They showed up half an hour later, took my statement, but didn't do anything. Could have been a trespasser. No proof it was them. The officer didn't even knock on Tony's door. So I installed cameras. 4 of them. 2 in front, 2 in back. Tony noticed them the next day and acted like he was amused. "Little paranoid, aren't we?" he said, waving as he got into his truck. I didn't say a word. Meanwhile, I kept pushing. I reported Rachel's notary fraud to the state. Sent in documents, signed affidavits, everything. My lawyer also filed a civil suit, trespassing, property damage, and forgery. He told me we had a good shot, especially with that signature. But Tony wasn't done. He filed for a restraining order, claimed I'd threatened him with violence, that I had anger problems. It was a total lie, but it forced me into court. And there, I saw what they were doing. They came in polished and smiling, like a Pinterest family. Tony wore a clean blue button-down. Rachel had her hair pulled back, baby bumps showing just enough to make her look fragile. They brought character letters from neighbors, probably the ones who saw his Facebook posts and believed him. He told the judge I had a vendetta against young people, that I ranted about entitlement and modern homes. He said I had a fixation on Rachel and made her feel unsafe. I sat there, jaw locked, listening to this guy try to paint me as some bitter old man. But when my turn came, I showed everything. The forged signature, the notary stamp, the city's original documents, the missing tools, the backyard photos. I kept calm. Just facts. The judge dismissed the restraining order. Tony and Rachel walked out looking like they'd swallowed nails. But the damage was done. Rumors had spread in the neighborhood. I noticed people I used to chat with avoiding me. Someone even left a passive-aggressive note on my porch. "Please keep the peace. This is a family neighborhood." I was losing more than tools and lawn space. I was losing my reputation. My home felt like a trap. My peaceful weekends were gone. Every time I stepped outside, I checked my cameras. Every night, I walked the perimeter like I was guarding something. But I wasn't quitting, because the notary board had contacted me. They were opening an investigation into Rachel, and my lawyer had a plan. And soon, so would I. A few weeks after the court hearing, I got a letter from the California Secretary of State's office. Rachel's notary license had been officially suspended pending a formal review. That meant she couldn't notarize anything until the case was closed. That should have felt like a win, but it was just the start. I figured Tony and Rachel would lay low after that. Instead, they got bolder. One morning, I walked out to find that someone had spray-painted "liar" and faded red on my side of the new fence, the one I never agreed to. The letters were big, sloppy, barely visible under a half-assed cleaning job, like they realized halfway through they were being recorded and tried to undo it. Problem was, they'd done it just outside my camera's blind spot. All I caught was a blurry figure climbing back over the fence. The police came, took photos, but again, no clear evidence. Just a note on the report. It got worse. 2 days later, I checked my mail and found a bright yellow card from Child Protective Services. I thought they delivered it by mistake, until I read it fully. Someone had filed an anonymous report claiming I had unsupervised minors in unsafe conditions. I don't even have kids living with me. My daughter's grown and out of state. The only minor that had been on my property was my godson during a weekend visit 6 months ago. Still, CPS had to follow up. I had to let a social worker into my home, explain everything, show my guest room, prove I wasn't hiding children in a damn shed. She left politely and later cleared me, but the shame of that moment, being investigated for something that dark, burned. That's when I knew. This wasn't about the fence anymore. Tony and Rachel were trying to push me out. I started talking to other neighbors. Quietly, carefully, and that's when I got my first break. A guy 2 houses down, Miguel, approached me one evening. Said he felt bad about believing the online gossip. Said he'd seen Tony meeting with the fence crew a week before they started demolition on my side. He had even overheard something about, just get it done while he's gone, he'll come around. Miguel agreed to write a statement for my lawyer. Then came the second twist. My lawyer called me and said the fence contractor had been subpoenaed. Under pressure, they turned over a signed contract between their company and Rachel alone. No mention of me. No signature. Nothing about a cost split. The whole shared cost line had been a lie. Rachel had paid for the fence herself and tried to force the city into reimbursing half by forging my signature to make it seem like a shared improvement. So this wasn't just personal, it was fraud against the city too. And here's where it got ugly for them. The city opened an internal review. I didn't even know about it at first. Apparently someone in the permit office realized they'd approved work based on a fake document and didn't want to be held liable. The investigation widened fast. Suddenly, Tony and Rachel were facing not just my civil lawsuit, but a possible criminal investigation. And you could see the panic on their faces. They stopped smiling. Rachel stopped walking her dog past my house. Tony stopped posting in the neighborhood groups. But it wasn't over, because I wasn't going to stop until everyone saw the truth, and they paid for what they'd done. The day the city investigator called me back, I was cleaning out the shed they'd rummaged through. I had almost forgotten what normal felt like. He said, "Mr. Carpenter, based on our findings, your neighbor submitted falsified documents and received approval under fraudulent circumstances. We're forwarding this to the district attorney." That was the moment I knew I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I'd been telling the truth all along. And finally, someone listened. 3 weeks later, Rachel was formally charged with 2 misdemeanors, notary fraud and falsifying a government record. Her license was revoked permanently. She lost her job. She worked for a title company, couldn't stay licensed without a clean record. I heard from a neighbor in real estate that they let her go quietly, but it made the rounds fast. Her face, her name, tied to fraud in every local industry Facebook group and forum in town. Tony tried to downplay it. He told people it was just a misunderstanding, but no one was buying it anymore. Then the real hammer dropped. My civil case went to court. I had everything in hand: the forged permit, Miguel's witness statement, the contractor's testimony, and photos of my damaged lawn and missing tools. Tony showed up with a cheap lawyer and a folder of character references. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. The judge didn't buy a single word of his defense. I won the case. Full damages for the fence, the tools, and legal fees, nearly $18,000. And because Rachel admitted under pressure that Tony was aware of the forgery and had used the document knowingly, he was held responsible too. But that wasn't even the best part. Because the local newspaper ran a small piece in the city and county briefs section, Modesto couple fined in property dispute after forgery, permit fraud. Their names were printed right there. I cut it out and pinned it to the inside of my shed door. It didn't take long after that. Their renovation project slowed to a crawl. A for sale sign appeared on their lawn 6 months later. Rumor was they were moving out of state. By the time they left, Tony wouldn't look me in the eye. Rachel didn't say goodbye. I stood on my front porch and watched the moving truck roll away like it was the last scene in a movie. They thought they could steal from me, lie about me, turn my home into a nightmare, and walk away clean. But they picked the wrong man. And now every time I walk my yard, replant the grass they trampled, or hear the quiet buzz of my new pressure washer, paid for with the settlement money, I remember exactly what they taught me. Never trust a neighbor with a smile too wide and a pin too quick. And always keep your receipts.